Alabama teen Ashley Jones has struggled through a life of emotional abuse and psychological setbacks.
Ashley's upbringing was one that was kind of doomed from the beginning.
But when she finds a boy who brings balance to her world, she'll go to the ends of the earth to keep him.
It was a terrible scene, like something out of a horror film.
She was willing to do anything to make sure they were together.
And later in Inkster, Michigan, following a series of family tragedies, Darlene Binyard is desperate to fill an emotional void.
Darlene was always looking for that strong male figure in her life.
But when true love comes knocking, it'll open a terrifying door she should have kept locked forever.
Loving each other that much and doing what they have done is disgusting.
They were ride or die, and were in it until the end.
There are hundreds of thousands of women in prison at any given time in the U.S. These are the true stories of women who committed heinous crimes in the name of love. For my man. Surrounded by crack houses on the dark side of Birmingham, Alabama, Ashley Jones's moral foundation was destined for destruction.
When you're in a housing projects community, there are a lot of folks that are there. They're low income, and a lot of times there is crime associated with that. So she has a lot of these things happening around her.
In addition to the troubles outside the walls, there's plenty of evil lurking within her own family.
Her father was very temperamental, and she didn't have any role models because both her parents had their own issues.
They didn't resolve conflict through talking. They fought.
According to Ashley, when she's not watching her mother suffer emotional trauma at the hands of her father, the girl, as well as her sister, fall victim to the tyrant's wrath.
Get away from me!
Her father once held her, her mother, and her sister at gunpoint, and he actually shot at a car that they were riding in.
Just recklessly unloads firearm into the vehicle. So this definitely was detrimental.
Despite the severity of her folks' repeated actions, no charges are ever filed, as the couple chooses to live their tempestuous life under society's radar.
They really didn't see bringing the law into it, because it was just their way of life.
As Ashley grows up, the extreme conditions wreak havoc on the girl's psyche, manifesting into trust issues and leaving her with a jaded sense of right and wrong.
I just thought it was extremely tragic for this young lady. She had no chance for a better life. She was doomed.
It's tough enough to grow up and deal with the changing emotions and hormones and all of those things that are part of getting older and evolving. But to grow up in such a turbulent sort of environment, that will have a lasting, devastating effect on one's life.
As time passes, Ashley's mom makes the decision to leave her husband behind and remarry.
It got worse because the man who then came into the picture pretty much replaced what the old husband did, and you have Ashley who is continuing to see this destructive behavior.
It started to affect her mental health. She would sometimes laugh to herself, talk to herself. She was paranoid.
Her inability to fit in quickly makes her an outcast and causes the reclusive ninth grader to seek out a fatal solution to her problems.
She was taking prescription medication to overdose.
Once that didn't really work, she attempted to cut herself. That landed her in the office of the psych counselors who diagnosed her with chronic depression.
For some people who cut themselves or try to attempt suicide in general, well, they may be trying to deal with some strong emotions, intense pressure, upsetting relationship problems. Sometimes it's something as simple as relief from bad feelings.
Instead of being put on medication, she and her sister are shipped off to live with their grandparents, DeRoy and Mary Knowles, as well as her Aunt Millie, who also lives in the house.
Her grandfather was very loving. He was a church man. I think they called him Deacon Knowles. He was a deacon in the church.
Sometimes seeking a new living situation or environment may be exactly what the doctor ordered. However, that new situation might make us more vulnerable to being isolated and lonely.
With her mental issues left to run rampant, the now 13-year-old walks through life scared and alone. But when she meets a boy who keeps her grounded, her mind is finally put to rest. Living just around the corner from Ashley, Jeremy Hart is streetwise beyond his years.
Jeremy is handsome, and he's very boastful. He's sort of a tough guy in the neighborhood.
And when the two are introduced at an after-hours party, they form an instant connection.
He loved the way she looked. He thought she was very beautiful, and he had a lot of confidence, and that attracted her to him.
After getting to know each other, Ashley learns the teen has never been in trouble with the law, but not for lack of trying.
He gloated to Ashley about intimidating people in the neighborhood. So for Ashley, at first she was taken aback by it, but she saw that as a sense of security, somebody she could confide in.
Though according to Jeremy, that's not the only heat he's been packing.
He bragged about his sexual prowess. He wanted to impress Ashley. So he probably puffed himself up a little bit.
He also had a child at 15 years old, so he was sexually very experienced, and Ashley liked that.
Although she's taken aback by Jeremy's hardened exterior, she's never been more vulnerable and longs for male attention. So in the weeks that follow, the two lost souls become joined at the hip.
And he says he loves her. That's something she's been lacking all of her life. And so they were with each other. They were inseparable.
Scientifically speaking, hormones do influence behaviors. So it's not at all atypical for a person who may not have the best character to appear to be attractive, moral, or even fun, especially to that young person going through those hormonal changes.
The welcomed affection causes the teen to let her guard down, and soon she not only loses her virginity to the more experienced lover, she loses all self-control.
Ashley was seeing Jeremy a lot, even driving her to skip school, sneak out of the house, which started to cause a little bit of rift with her grandparents who she was living with at the time.
They did not like Jeremy at all, period. They felt that Jeremy was a thug, street hoodlum. They did not want him interfering in Ashley's life. They were very, very strict on her.
When the restrictions become too much to bear, the girl grows desperate to break free of her household ties.
She didn't want to go to foster care. She didn't want to become a ward of the state. She wanted to be with Jeremy.
And when the couple maps out a macabre way to make that happen, the impressionable teen is all in.
Jeremy and Ashley tortured that family.
She was willing to do anything to make sure they were together.
Emma, troubled Ashley Jones has finally found love in 15-year-old Jeremy Hart. Unfortunately, her grandparents don't approve and forbid her to see him.
Get out. Sometimes the allure of doing something that you're not supposed to do can overshadow right from wrong. And for young people especially, to buck those rules, well, that excitement is overwhelming.
Enraged that they're being kept apart, Jeremy and Ashley come up with a plan where they can both truly be free together.
Jeremy told Ashley they need to get rid of the grandfather, her aunt, her grandmother, and her little sister.
They all lived in the house, and they were all pretty much instrumental in some form or fashion in keeping her away from Jeremy.
To do so, Ashley agrees to steal some of her grandfather's guns so they can make the murders quick and clean. When they're finished, they'll rob them and cover their tracks by any means necessary.
And they were going to burn them up, get rid of the evidence, whatever was needed so that they could move on and go live their free life.
Ashley is on board with the disturbing idea and soon realizes if she wants to be with him, no one can stand in their way.
If Jeremy told Ashley to jump off of a cliff, she probably would have done it at that point because she loved and trusted him so much.
Scientifically, we know that the brain doesn't mature until someone's around age 25. So before then, you're going to see young people do whatever they want, whatever they feel, no matter how foolish it happens to be.
With the stolen guns in hand, Ashley gets to work, creating a solution to ensure any evidence they might leave behind will go up in smoke.
She mixed lighter fluid, nail polish remover, and rubbing alcohol together. Something that would be very flammable.
Armed and ready, the duo sets their plan in motion on a sweltering August evening.
was a Sunday night. The family is sort of moving about throughout the day as they would any normal Sunday. By Sunday evening, the family is sitting around in the den watching television.
Ashley is monitoring her family. Everybody's in the den, including her grandfather, her grandmother, her aunt, and her 10-year-old sister, Joanna.
Around 11, her loved ones finally settle in.
Grandmother had went to sleep, the aunt went to sleep, and so did her sister. And so she was just laying around, relaxing. And her grandfather started to nod off while watching TV. And that's when she hit up Jeremy to come over, and she snuck him in.
Jeremy, with his red bandana around part of his face and gun in hand, he went inside the house and approached DeRoy Knowles.
Without hesitation, Jeremy raises the gun and shoots her groggy grandfather in the head.
Miraculously, he didn't die instantly. He actually stumbled towards the kitchen and collapsed on the ground.
Next, the pair goes upstairs to Millie's bedroom, where Jeremy unloads 3 bullets into the unsuspecting aunt.
Ashley actually saw that Millie was still breathing. Jeremy told her, finish the job. Grabbed these portable heaters and they started beating Aunt Millie with the heaters.
Meanwhile, in the next bedroom, Ashley's grandmother has awoken and comes to see what all the commotion is about.
Jeremy! The first person she sees is Jeremy with this red bandana concealing part of his face, but she does recognize him.
Using his final bullet, Jeremy fires at the frail matriarch, striking her in the shoulder and leaving her for dead.
They scrambled downstairs, and that's when they discovered that Ashley's grandfather was still alive.
And Jeremy started beating Ashley's grandfather with everything he had to try to finish him. But before he killed him, he asked where was the money. He needed money.
Where's the money? That's it.
He told Jeremy that the money was under the mattress, and they found $300.
With loot in hand, the couple no longer has a use for DeRoy and decides to finish him off.
Jeremy grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed Ashley's grandfather in the throat 2 times, and then he sliced his throat open.
Ashley took her concoction and poured it over the grandfather and lit him ablaze.
Research suggests that children who have been involved in parricide, which would be the killing of parents or grandparents, tend to fall into 3 categories. One would be severe mental illness. The second would be very dangerous, antisocial behaviors. The third would be victims of physical and/or emotional abuse. But to light someone on fire, well, that takes that to a whole new category.
The fire on his body rages, then quickly snuffs out as DeRoy lets out a final dying groan. A noise that triggers a wounded grandma to muster her energy and lurch downstairs.
She staggered over to her husband and tried to save his life.
And so that's when Ashley went over and just started to repeatedly stab the grandmother.
With most of the family believed to be dead, Ashley covers the rest of their bodies in her handcrafted fire starter and lights the fuse. Just then, a tiny figure appears. It's 10-year-old Joanna, and she quickly makes a break for the exit.
She tried her best to get out of there, but before she can reach the door, Jeremy grabs her.
Pulling out a different and fully loaded gun, Jeremy presses the barrel directly against his hostage's temple. And later, in Inkster, Michigan, Darlene Binyard gets a hard lesson in love when she lets her man steal more than just her heart.
If DeJuan said this is what we need to do to be happy, then Darlene was all in.
She believed in him, and ultimately, that's what caused her to commit these crimes.
Ashley Jones and her boyfriend Jeremy have just brutally ambushed some of her family members in their Birmingham, Alabama home. But when the presumed lone survivor, her 10-year-old sister Joanna, makes a break for the door, Ashley enters the fray, ready to sever her family ties once and for all.
Ashley began stabbing her sister 13 and 14 times. One stab wound punctured her lung.
It's ironic because initially Ashley was kind of like her guardian to some degree. And for her to turn on her sister and attempt to kill her, that just spoke to how strongly they were trying to be together at no cost.
As the child collapses on the ground, the murderers assume they've done her in. Little do they know, wounded Joanna is savvier than they ever imagined.
The sister played dead. I think she knew that there was not going to be many ways out of this situation.
For a 10-year-old child to be able to think so quickly is nothing short of a marvel. So to call her courageous would be an understatement of epic proportions.
With the job believed to be done, Jeremy tells his girlfriend it's time to move on to phase 2.
He instructed her to find towels, bed sheets, paper, to make this fire where they could set it ablaze and bring the whole house down.
After dousing the items and lighting the fuse, the couple quickly makes a break for the exit. Once outside, they steal her grandparents' Cadillac before heading to a nearby hotel, where an older friend has rented them a room to hide out.
Once they got to the hotel, it was almost as if nothing happened. Their plan, went off without a hitch.
They have no idea that back at the smoldering crime scene, some signs of life are rising from the ashes.
Miraculously, her grandmother came to, and her baby sister Joanna noticed this.
She pulled herself up, she grabbed her by the hand, and led her out of the house.
After escaping, the preteen leaves her woozy grandma safely on the porch and bravely treks through their desolate neighborhood for help.
So here you have a 10-year-old walking down a dark road, stabbed in her face, her stomach, and eventually a car does stop and takes her to a convenience store, and that's where she calls 911.
Police and firefighters quickly arrive and extinguish the blaze. But when they step foot inside, it leaves them with more burning questions than answers.
What they find is a slaughterhouse.
They see the grandfather laying there on the floor with those stab wounds.
They go to the bedrooms and they find Aunt Millie is dead in her bed, still with the heater on top of her body.
While investigators secure the scene, EMTs do everything they can to save the 2 living victims.
Ashley's grandmother and her sister are taken to 2 separate hospitals. Her sister is treated for multiple stab wounds as well as a collapsed lung.
The grandmother was burned over 35% of her body from head to toe, and she ended up staying in a coma for about 6 weeks.
While Joanna recovers, police hit her up for answers as to who was responsible for this heinous crime. And they're floored by her response.
My sister, Ashley.
She told them that it was her own flesh and blood and her boyfriend that did this to them.
Meanwhile, in the nearby hotel room, the felonious couple spends the night partying and watching TV. But when a breaking news alert flashes across the screen, the festivities come to a screeching halt.
They thought they had finished off everybody in the house. So when the news report came on and she saw that her grandmother survived and her sister, she was quite disappointed.
And Ashley said under her breath, "I thought I killed that bitch."
Assuming police are hot on their heels, the lovebirds lay low in their rented room until morning. But when the sun crests over the horizon, investigators are right behind it.
The police actually found Ashley's grandfather's car sitting in the parking lot of this motel. So they knew they had to be inside.
They talk with folks there. They figure out which room Ashley and Jeremy are in. They go in, they apprehend them, they take them into custody.
In separate interrogations, the young lovers show no regret as they make full confessions about their involvement in the crime.
In some couples, we see lying as a way to exhibit solidarity. But on some rare occasions, we see young couples who may engage in these sorts of behaviors, feel justified in them, and wear it as a badge of honor.
With their stories on the books, Jeremy is charged with 2 counts of capital murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. His woman is arrested on the spot and charged with the same.
Before she was taken away, Ashley asked the detectives,
"Before you go, you just tell Jeremy that I love him."
to tell her boyfriend that she loved him.
Following their respective trials, Ashley and Jeremy are both found guilty on all charges.
Despite them being juveniles, they both receive life in prison without a chance at parole.
And only when handed her fate does the teen finally exhibit signs of remorse for her deplorable actions and getting involved with a boy like Jeremy.
Ashley saw Jeremy as sort of her savior. That's how he acted with her. He was saving her from this terrible life that she had been living. So she felt that Jeremy was her ticket out, and she took it.
It's clear that Ashley was on this high with Jeremy, who was providing her all the things she had never had. And you put that with a person in need, and there you have the perfect mixture of evil that ended up coming about between the two when they carried out this heinous crime.
I truly believe that children aren't born evil, that perhaps they are victims of very dysfunctional circumstances. My only hope is, as they face their punishment, that somehow they can have that corrective emotional experience to somehow be productive citizens in the future.
Ashley's future crashed and burned when she let the boy of her dreams rake her through the coals. In Inkster, Michigan, loving single mother Darlene Vineyard learns that the right man can light up your life, but also bring a world of darkness. Although things haven't been easy for Darlene or her 7 loving brothers and sisters, the beautiful 16-year-old is determined to make sure her story is a happy one.
She just enjoyed spending time with her friends. Like, the one thing she really enjoyed was writing. She loved writing. She loved poetry.
The teen's parents recently started a new chapter by moving the family from the rough and tumble streets of Detroit, Michigan, to more peaceful Warren, still within the city limits. Unfortunately, trouble comes along with them.
They didn't have a lot of money. They were looking for a better life. Even though the environment was more quiet, they still were struggling financially.
As the Vineyards watch the bills pile up, Darlene does her best to keep an eye on the family's oldest son, Albert, who's battling with sickle cell anemia.
And that required round-the-clock care. And of course, being such a large family, it definitely put a strain on them.
There was a lot on her, being a young woman and a female within the family, so she took on a lot of those roles.
Long-term medical issues can mean a lifetime of personal and financial obligations. And the fact of the matter is, not everyone is willing to put the needs of a sickly loved one in front of their own happiness.
Though when it rains, it pours, and the family is dealt yet another blow when Albert succumbs to his disease.
He had a bone marrow transplant, and the new bone marrow he got attacked his lungs, and he just couldn't take it anymore.
To rid themselves of any bad memories, the family moves yet again, this time to neighboring Inkster. But Mom still struggles to cope with the loss, leaving Darlene desperately looking for a shoulder to lean on.
It kind of rocked her world. And that's when Dad kind of stepped up, and he became the rock of the family and kind of helped pull them together.
But their bond is tested once again when Dad dies unexpectedly, leaving Darlene to pick up the pieces of her shattered heart.
It was really hard. It was out of nowhere. Out of nowhere.
To lose a loved one is so devastating, especially as you're watching them die over the years. But then to lose another loved one in a short period of time is even more devastating and can have lingering effects over a lifetime.
As time goes on, the siblings stay close, but leave the nest to go their separate ways. Unfortunately, after a series of failed relationships following high school, Darlene feels more alone than ever.
She had 2 children at 20. So she was trying to find her way, but still she did not have that partner that I think most of us look for.
Darlene was daddy's girl, and she was still looking to fill that void, to fill the love that she had in the relationship that she had with her father.
That is, until she meets a man who takes hold of her heart and shepherds her down a path of greed, violence, and deceit.
Going into someone's house is always a huge risk, but after all, this is the man she loves.
Doing what they have done is disgusting. It was like Bonnie and Clyde to me.
fighting for emotional survival in Inkster, Michigan.
The effects of losing a parent can last a lifetime, and a vulnerability that we feel now puts us at risk for lowering our standards in people who may not be healthy for us.
But when a sibling introduces her to Duane Crawford, she finally feels whole again.
He was living down the street from her sister. So when she goes to visit her sister, there he is right in the neighborhood.
After exchanging pleasantries, Darlene can instantly feel herself being drawn in by the 22-year-old's charm and charisma.
He was funny, he liked to joke around.
They chatted it up and found out that they had a lot in common.
Like Darlene, Duane has also faced his fair share of struggles and is trying to piece his life back together.
He, too, was dealing with the loss of his grandmother, and so I think they shared that loss in common, and it hit them hard.
Tragedies have a way of bonding people together. Not only is it a conversation starter, but it is something that now can make us accelerate what we feel for one another romantically.
The story is more than relatable to Darlene, and she's quick to offer a shoulder to lean on.
They seem to genuinely care for each other, and it seems like he did find a kindred spirit in her.
As time passes, the twosome finds themselves growing attached at the hip.
She loved the fact that he was a protector of her, and he loved the fact that she was so loyal and devoted.
They would not let go of each other, and I knew this relationship was different. Y'all really love each other.
Over the next 4 years, the couple's love continues to flourish. Their part-time jobs allow them to afford a modest apartment on the edge of town, where they eventually welcome 2 beautiful children.
They had dreams not only for themselves as a couple, but they had dreams for the children as well. So they were on the right track.
Though the walls of their perfect world begin to crumble when Duane secretly decides to trade their financial stability for a 5-finger discount.
He broke into a neighbor's house and got caught trying to steal a TV and gaming console.
Up until now, Duane's had no prior brushes with the law, which is why the now 25-year-old Darlene is so appalled when her man is charged with second-degree home invasion and spends the next 1.5 years in prison.
And that was very difficult on Darlene. They were already struggling, but now you add the fact that he's gone, and she has to take care of that family completely on her own.
It's easy to overlook the misdeeds of someone that we may love. We see what we want to see, but if we adore that person, then we will stay by their side no matter what it is they do.
Once he's let out on parole for good behavior, Duane is determined to turn his life around for the sake of his family.
He thought that he would be able to pull things together and make a clean start of it, but they had money problems and things got so bad that they ended up being evicted from their home.
They sent their children to live with more stable family members.
Displaced and alone, the pair desperately searches for a new home sweet home. And when they stumble upon an abandoned house, they decide to lay down the welcome mat.
They was squatting in the house, and they was there for a year, so they had squatters' rights. She had it nice and neat and everything.
Not only do the new digs offer the couple freedom to do as they please, it's a place to lay low from the government's prying eyes.
She picked up a drug problem, and because of their living conditions and the fact that their children weren't living with them, they were being investigated by Child Protective Services.
I think that it was just the toll that things had taken on them because they had been through a lot. They were down, they were out.
Instead of scrounging money to find a more suitable place and possibly get their children back, the unmotivated couple spends the next few months spiraling deeper into dissent.
The drugs was that more important than our family, the kids.
That's when the couple discusses a surefire way to feed her needs.
Rob some houses.
They decide to start breaking into homes as a way of earning some quick cash and putting some food on the table.
Desperate people do desperate things, and when you hit rock bottom, it is so easy to take that illegal road to get to where you want to be.
Darlene is initially hesitant, as she's always tried to live on the up and up.
But in the end, if this is what they need to do, to be a happy family, to get our lives back on track, makes me believe Darlene was all in.
So in the wee hours of a September morning, Duane walks to the nearby town of Westland, setting off a terrifying chain of events which leaves police baffled and residents of their quiet community deadbolting their doors.
I don't think you can ever really forget when someone points a gun in your face.
Her love for him outweighed everything else.
Show your love for Ricky.
Heard that he could do this.
He walks about 3 miles and finds a house that is easy to break into.
He cut the screen out of the rear kitchen window, got into the house. He grabbed a purse off the table and some cash, credit cards, and bolted out, never even seeing anyone. It was a piece of cake.
After returning to his woman, the couple uses the pilfered earnings to splurge on some basic human necessities.
And that goes back to showing you just how poor they were and how they were struggling.
With the success of the first robbery, it's not hard for the couple to try their luck again, a few nights later in Garden City, 3 miles away. Only this time, he wants her to tag along.
Before, she had just sat back home and waited for him, but now she's an accomplice. She's with him to do this dirty work herself.
They quickly spot a home with no outside lights, dogs, or security systems. And Duane forces his way inside, through the locked front door, though he's shocked to see the aging homeowner waiting for him.
It took him off guard because now he's faced with a decision of what do I do with this person who's in this house?
So he forced the elderly man into a back bedroom, and Darlene stayed in the living room.
A few minutes later, Duane emerges with a handful of stolen goods, including keys to the man's vehicle.
They took his gun and took his car that he worked hard for. He has a family that cares about him. How dare you do this?
And that changed everything because now they're not limited to where they can get to on foot.
The rattled but uninjured homeowner dials 911, reporting the attack as well as his stolen Impala, while the robbers quickly flee, relieved that no one got hurt.
What if that man killed you? What if y'all killed him? It would have been tragic.
Police take the man's report seriously and promise to be on the lookout for his stolen ride. Meanwhile, it's just before 6 a.m. when Duane suggests they strike again, this time in their hometown.
They go back to Inkster, and they pick this particular house. Again, he kicks in the front door.
After holding the female homeowner at gunpoint and swiping her laptop and some credit cards, the duo quickly vanishes back into the night.
And then they headed to the car, loaded the stuff in the car, and they were out of there.
When they leave, the woman calls police and she reports what happens.
Investigators add her complaint to the growing list of troubling reports as the couple continues their felonious spree in nearby Westland.
And they were looking for houses that didn't appear to have a security system, didn't have lights on, no cars in the driveway. If it was unsecured, then they would go inside.
Only this time, a family is just beginning their day when the duo creeps in through an unlocked side door.
They were getting the kids ready for school and getting ready to get to work. And so it certainly caught this family by surprise and off guard.
Holding them at gunpoint, Duane demands they hand over their wallets. And as the family trembles in fear, they realize their fates rest in the hands of Duane's itchy trigger finger.
You have no idea what this person is going to do or what they're capable of.
I can't imagine what they went through. Their lives are not the same.
Darlene Binyard and her man, Duane, are holding an innocent Westland, Michigan family at gunpoint, their latest targets in a string of robberies.
Your life is probably flashing before your eyes. Your heart's racing. You don't know if you're going to die at this point, and you very well could.
So when Duane threatens to pull the trigger if they don't hand over some cash, they have no choice but to give in to the madman's demands.
No one was hurt. They got away with their wallets and their bounty for the day and headed back to the getaway car.
To rob houses is one thing, but to hold people at gunpoint? Well, that's not only a lack of self-control, but in my opinion, is selfish, monstrous, and shows a complete lack of responsibility.
Not pressing their luck anymore that day, the couple heads to Dewan's unwitting aunt's house to hole up and count their booty.
They were kind of just reveling in the success of their robberies.
They're at a point of no return. They're not ready to stop. They're ready to keep going.
It was disgusting, and it broke our hearts, because we would never think that she would do anything like this, and we weren't raised that way at all.
There's a school of thought that looks at crimes being some sort of a self-medication. In other words, people get involved in it in order to feel better about themselves.
Unfortunately, when they head to Inkster to strike more houses the next night, they hit an unexpected roadblock.
The car that they had stolen from the elderly man in Garden City ran out of gas. So they left the car right there on the side of the road and walked back to Dewan's aunt's house.
Little do they know, police have been on the lookout for the vehicle ever since it was reported stolen, and an officer spots it while on routine patrol.
And inside, Dewan leaves critical evidence for the police to tie these robberies to him. He leaves behind a prescription bottle with his name on it.
So that gave them a name to look up this person in the system. And when they did that, they found out that Dewan was on parole and that he had served time for, guess what? Home invasion.
And that's not all. After contacting his parole officer, they learned Dewan recently had a baby with his girlfriend, Darlene. And according to records, every time social workers came knocking to check in, they received no answer.
Dipping and running from CPS and all that, it was just crazy.
Detectives have always had a hunch that all three break-ins are connected.
They had the same MO, and they were all committed within a 5-mile radius of each other.
And now that they have some suspects, they work feverishly to track down Darlene and her man.
It was difficult because they were living in an abandoned house, but they certainly have family ties. Any address associated with a family member would be investigated.
6 days after the crime spree ended, the police show up at Dewan's aunt's house, and they have a warrant.
But the second Dewan sees them coming, he decides to save himself instead of sticking by his woman.
Dewan, all of a sudden, tries to run out of the house, and of course, that was not gonna work.
Darlene tells investigators she's not sure where Dewan is. But when they scour the property, they quickly locate him, hiding in the backyard.
They were able to catch him and put handcuffs on him right then and there.
When we're looking at signs of guilt, we typically look at avoidance, excessive emotion, even body language. When you're running away from the police, well, then that is the sure sign, because that is as guilty gets.
When the dust settles, detectives find several stolen credit and identification cards throughout the house, as well as the Impala's vehicle registration in Darlene's purse.
At this point, Darlene and Dewan are caught red-handed. They're charged with first-degree home invasion, 4 counts of armed robbery, and felony possession of a firearm.
Not wanting to try her luck with a jury, Darlene pleads guilty and is sentenced to 8 to 20 years. Her man follows suit, pleading guilty to armed robbery and felony gun charges, earning him 17 to 40 years.
She made her bed, she has to lay in it, and those were her choices, not ours.
Behind bars, Darlene expresses incredible remorse for her actions, but not for getting involved with Dewan, who she says will always be her soulmate.
I think Dewan is the person that filled that void that she was looking for after losing her dad. But guess what? You can make a decision that says, yes, Dewan, I love you, but Dewan, we should not be together, and move on. She did not make that choice.
She's very sorry. She apologized to each and every one of us. She writes letters and tells us that she's so sorry about everything that had happened. And she's grateful that they didn't kill anyone.
The tragedy here is that you have 2 people who came from solid backgrounds, but yet somehow fell prey to the dark side of life. And not only did they lose their freedom, but now there are 6 children who are going to grow up not ever get